Because of the advent of the Dragon Balls, Dragon Ball in itself is not that sad of a series. While we have sad moments because of the existence of the Dragon Balls, we always have this thought that in the back of our mind, characters can always come back and live to fight another day. But unfortunately for Future Gohan, he was a victim of being in a timeline where this wasn't accessible to him, and when he died, he actually died. And just to make matters worse, Zeno literally just embraced the entire universe, so he died on top of already being dead in the first place. But in today's video, we are actually going to discuss specifically why Future Gohan's death is no question the saddest moment in Dragon Ball history for so many different reasons that we could even go into. Now, the first thing that we have to talk about is when Future Gohan died. The method that he was killed is one of the most brutal ways that you can imagine a character dying in Dragon Ball. When you look at the fact that the androids hit him and literally just completely blasted him until he died, you can just imagine the extreme amount of pain of feeling all of these energy blasts just hitting you all at once by two entities that have infinite energy and can literally just fire at you forever. But that directly takes us to the dead body scene. When you look at the anime version and you see that Future Gohan was lying on the ground with his eyes completely lifeless, the rain was a beautiful metaphor that the anime adaptation added to this scene specifically, because when Trunks turns into a Super Saiyan for the first time, because of the manga version, obviously Trunks already knew how to turn into a Super Saiyan, but for the anime adaptation, Trunks turning into a Super Saiyan was such a perfect moment because of the fact that the rain felt like an emotional downpour that was going throughout Trunks' life, and that mixed with his emotions and turning into a Super Saiyan at such a moment was truly a beautiful scene when you look back at it in hindsight. And the thing about this is that when we look at this in the manga adaptation, we don't see how the androids killed Gohan, and we also don't see the rain when Trunks goes over to his body, even if you look at the full-color manga edition, and that in itself made the manga weaker in portraying the value that Future Gohan had towards his life. But when we look at Future Gohan's life in a grander scheme, it's just really depressing when you think about the fact that the future timeline in itself is so depressing, when this is a timeline where all of the other Z fighters died for different reasons. Goku died of a heart virus and all of the other fighters were killed. So just to start things off, you feel sympathy for Gohan because from the very beginning of everything, you can see that he's essentially all by himself because Trunks is a kid and he's not strong enough to fight yet, so Gohan has to be the sole warrior on the planet fighting against these two, not one, but two powerful entities all the time. And when you factor in that because he's literally the only fighter until Trunks comes of age, that just makes you imagine all of the battles that he's lost to the androids over all of these years, but he has to keep trying because he understands that there's nothing else and no one else that could do anything about the situation at the point. And it really shows you the consequence of what the Dragon Ball world would look like if our characters lived in a world where death was actually a legitimate consequence and you just can't ask the Namekians or just summon Shenron to fix all of your problems. Now, the thing too that we also have to point out is that when we look at the anime adaptation, it's also important to point out that Future Gohan did not die like a hero in the manga adaptation. Future Gohan knocked out Trunks, went to go fight the androids, kicked Android 17 when he was off guard, and 17 basically just killed him off screen with 18 not even needing to jump in. But the way that it was portrayed in the anime adaptation, first with the amusement park battle where Gohan starts getting the upper hand on 17 and then 18 jumps in, and then what we see later on when the androids finally kill Gohan, that 18 once again has to jump in to try and fight against Gohan. All of this shows that Gohan really went out like a badass. He truly did, because the androids had to gang up on him and fight him at 100% to fully kill him. Whereas if you think about it in the manga adaptation, because of the fact that the androids just killed him and kept him alive essentially for their own amusement completely changes things. The way that 17 said, "I didn't even use half of my power the last time I fought you," it really goes into showing the level of shock that Gohan had, because Gohan made an extremely terrified look after that, because he thought all of this time that he had gotten strong enough to at least compete against the androids more, only to find out that he was essentially a pawn on the chessboard, a tool for the androids to use for their own self-amusement. And as a result of them, they just basically killed Gohan because they were bored. And in itself, even though he didn't die heroically, in a lot of ways, the way that the manga portrayed Gohan's death just made him feel so much more pathetic, which made his death in a lot of ways a lot sadder, that here's this guy fighting and believing in this whole life that he was actually making progress, and then the androids just kill him because they were bored. Now, something else too that we also have to compare here is to compare Future Gohan's death to other major sacrifices. Now, there are some other sad moments in Dragon Ball, like when Goku died to Raditz, or when Goku died against Cell, but the thing about those two moments, and specifically the second scene that I feel like a lot of Dragon Ball fans believe is the saddest scene, is that Goku died completely heroically to stop Cell, even though Cell technically came back, but that's another conversation for another day. Gohan just basically died because he died. He could have evaded the androids when they were fighting that city, and he fought heroically to try and protect whoever was left in that city, but when you analyze the actual dialogue, Future Gohan knew that he was going on a suicide mission when you look at the anime subtitles, and also when you look at what the manga was saying. And because of this, it feels like his life was essentially just thrown away, which in itself means that his death just felt a lot more tragic, that here's a guy who's doing everything. And because of all of these reasons, combined with the fact that Future Gohan also had one arm this whole time, also adds to all of this. Like, the show and Toriyama specifically depicted Gohan with an actual disability. Now, that disability in itself did make Gohan look like a badass, but because he was fighting the androids with one arm, it just really portrayed such a bleak and hopeless world that both Gohan and Trunks were living in. And as a result of that, it makes you feel even more sympathy for Gohan, watching him go into a battle against two androids with one arm, and you know the odds are completely stacked against him, but he's gonna try his best anyways, which definitely added to the sympathetic effect that we would feel as viewers watching Gohan die. We also have to remember the fact that when Gohan died, we also feel a lot of sympathy for Trunks as a character, because now, unfortunately, Trunks would have to be thrusted into the exact same spot that Gohan was in for years. Now he has to be the protector. Now he's not going to really have any assistance outside of Bulma, who can help him in terms of technology, but can't really push him in terms of fighting and training anymore, especially because in the future timeline she didn't have the resources to create a gravity chamber. And as a result of this, and when we look at Gohan, we have to also remember that Gohan meant much more to Trunks than just one thing. Gohan was effectively Trunks' father, because Vegeta was never a part of Trunks' life when he was a baby, and then he died so early that he could never even be a part of Trunks' life anyways. And considering the fact that the future timeline was completely different, even if Vegeta was alive, he most likely would have never been a part of that Trunks' life, because his heart didn't change, because the future Trunks went back to the past to change his character. So, because of this, Future Gohan is effectively Trunks' father, he's effectively Trunks' big brother, and he's also effectively Trunks' best friend. So when Trunks loses Gohan, he loses all of that masculine essence in his life. And for all of those reasons, the death of Gohan has so much weight to it that a lot of other deaths in Dragon Ball simply just didn't have. And when you also think about who Gohan is, this is the swashbuckling young kid with all of the potential in the world. And when you think about a character like Gohan dying, it just gives you a different effect when you compare him to true warriors like Goku and Vegeta. This version of Gohan became a complete warrior because it was necessary for him to become one, to become stoic, to lose all of his emotions, even though his emotions were a gift, in order to survive living in such a tyrannical world. And as a result of this, we completely detach ourselves from the fact that we actually see a major time skip with Gohan, where we see he's just a kid and we see him become a man. But whereas the Gohan in the actual anime adaptation, we can actually see, specifically when we look at the different time periods, that Gohan ages slowly. And seeing and having the vision of Gohan being that kid that was thrusted into such a difficult life, having to die like that, just has a completely different effect than seeing it with a character like Goku. Whereas when you just look at Gohan's childhood and all of the things that he faced from before, then when you combine what he had to face as an adult, it just gives you a completely different effect when you see Goku's son dying, because he's supposed to be the bringer of light, the one with all of the potential, the one who's supposed to be protected by others, and with him having to become the protector and Trunks is the one with all of the potential, the shift in roles simply just adds to how much Gohan meant to that specific world, and why his death made so much weight in terms of the Dragon Ball universe. So ultimately, guys, for all of these reasons, we can say with absolute certainty that Future Gohan's death is by far the saddest death in Dragon Ball history.